The office of Lady Magazine was located in the very centre of the metropolis. Getting there, especially during the morning rush hour, was a challenge. However, Dolores managed it, albeit not without adventures. It all started in the morning, when the hot water was turned off in her house. Dolores had to find a basin and heat water to clean herself up. When Dolores was ready, her father approached her. In honour of such an important event as an interview for her dream job, he handed her a key, not to some luxury car adorned with a huge bow, but to his own old car. Her family were ordinary people with average incomes, so her father simply entrusted his cherished motorcar to his daughter, who had recently obtained her driver's license. "You'll get there faster," David said, but he was sorely mistaken in his calculations. Alas, either the old car was tired of cruising the city streets, or the new driver wasn't to its liking. But it stopped halfway, coughing irritably. Dolores barely had time to react and turn into a roadside store's parking lot, still earning a couple of unhappy honks from the motorist behind her. "No, no, no," Dolores pleaded, looking with horror at the time slipping away and at the dying car. "Please, not now." But the car was deaf to her pleas. Dolores tapped on the steering wheel in impotent anger, but it did not revive the vehicle. She got out of the cabin, walked around the car, then in frustration kicked the wheel. It didn't help. Her toes, already squeezed by uncomfortable shoes, only became sorer. Remembering how much her father loved this car, Dolores felt ashamed. She furtively stroked the hood and muttered, "I'm sorry, but what am I going to do with you, huh? I'm late." As if answering her question, a fancy car parked nearby. Dolores looked at the black shiny body, so polished it hurt to look at. A young man in fancy glasses stepped out. He didn't look much older than she was. "Young lady, may I help you? Is your car broken down?" he asked, displaying remarkable deductive skills. Dolores, lacking glasses, put her hand to her forehead like a visor and squinted. "Can you take a look at it?" she asked hopefully. "Are you a mechanic?" "No, I'm not a mechanic, I'm a lawyer," the young man admitted honestly, smiling charmingly. Dolores sighed heavily. "Then leave a business card. I'll call you when I decide to sue my dad's car for this setup." "I can at least take a look," the lawyer persisted, unbuttoning his shirt cuffs to roll up his sleeves. Dolores barely suppressed a snort. She appreciated his participation, but there was no time for idle chatter. However, this guy had already opened the hood, and smoke was pouring out. "You've overheated it," declared the not a mechanic but a lawyer. The cool temperature had risen. The engines boiled. "Can it cool down?" asked the owner of the affected car, peering over his shoulder and involuntarily inhaling the delicious aroma of his cologne, which overpowered even the car's smell. "Let it stand with the hood open. We can add antifreeze later," the stranger suggested. "Then we'll start the engine and look for leaks. But you'll still need to go to a service centre." "I have no time for that," Dolores moaned. "I'm already late, and I didn't understand a word of what you told me." The man smiled with the corner of his mouth and cast another flirtatious glance at Dolores. "Then you should call a tow truck." Realizing she had no choice, Dolores called her dad, cried into the phone, and he promised to come to decide what to do with the car. Thankfully, he had spare keys, and Dolores had parked the car so it wouldn't obstruct anyone. All this time, the mysterious stranger stayed with Dolores, intrigued by the unfolding drama. "I can give you a ride," he offered, taking off his glasses to reveal honest, incredibly beautiful sky-blue eyes, framed by black eyelashes. "Where do you want to go?" Dolores almost blurted out her destination, but caught herself in time. She imagined getting into this kind-looking man's car, only to have him press a chloroform-soaked cloth to her face, carefully pack her body in the trunk, and take her to the forest to feed her to wild boars. "Thank you very much, but I'll call a cab," she said, My mother and the crime shows warned me never to get into a car with strangers." The guy couldn't hold back a chuckle. "Let's get acquainted. My name is Mark." "Dolores," the girl smiled, but didn't give in to his charm. "But I'll call a cab anyway." "Are you really saying that I look like a criminal?" Mark quirked his eyebrows. "I'm saying that criminals rarely look like criminals. There are some good-looking ones." "Ah, thank you," Mark said hesitantly, unsure whether he'd been insulted or complimented. Dolores, already dialing a cab number on her phone, shamelessly continued her monologue. "Only you're a bit too friendly. We don't live in a Disney fairy tale, so I won't easily allow the prince in a black Mercedes to whisk me away into the sunset." Dolores grumbled. "Who in our time is so eager to help a stranger? Only a maniac." Dolores was very worried, and when she was worried, she usually said everything that came into her head. "I just saw you kicking the car and then stroking it and whispering something. I couldn't drive by." The man, who was now choking on his laughter, revealed his cards. Dolores blushed, realizing she'd been caught. However, now she wanted to ride with this guy even less. Thankfully, the cab service operator picked up the phone and found a suitable car. Miraculously, the available cab driver was just moving in the stream of cars sliding past Dolores. Mark had a strange feeling, realizing that the girl was about to slip away from him. He didn't want to part. Even when he was moving in traffic, frankly bored, and noticed the girl, his heart trembled. Not only because she was good-looking. Mark saw beautiful girls often, which could be said without false modesty. On the radio, a song played about seeing the signs of fate, hearing your heart, and the guy listened. The thing is, the blonde seemed familiar to him. Even when he, without delay, twisted the steering wheel and drove to the curb, he was sure that he knew this lady. Only from where? He decided not to voice his thoughts, however. Otherwise, the beauty would brand him not only a criminal, but also a stalker. However, Mark's interest was strong. He liked the girl very much, just like that at first sight. He was a man of determination, so he didn't give up and tried humour. "Well, why don't you leave your phone number? And we'll have coffee tonight, or on the weekend, if you like. You can pick me up yourself," he grinned. "I'm sorry, but I don't need a date right now. I need to work. I can't think of anything else," Dolores said honestly. She glanced at the man, realizing that something had come alive inside her. Maybe it was those butterflies everyone talked about. Dolores had never been in a relationship. At the college, she'd been busy with everything she could get her hands on, just not romance. At school, she'd developed many complexes and a sincere belief that no one would ever love her. As time went on, the complexes faded. Dolores transformed from a nibbled ugly duckling into a beautiful swan, but she still didn't see it. Therefore, the attention of a man like Mark, a lawyer in a luxury car, with a Hollywood smile and a mop of dark hair worthy of a shampoo commercial, frightened rather than delighted her. The cab arrived and Dolores jumped into it right away. Mark, unaware of what he was doing, followed, knocking on the window. Ignoring the driver's displeased look, the brunette blurted out what was going through his head. "I think we've met before." "Well, that's some very ancient approach." The blonde let out a chuckle. "I'm serious." The man didn't give up, gaining a step. "Then we'll meet again and call it fate." Dolores smiled at him. Her smile was ingenious, wide and sincere. When Dolores smiled, her eyes narrowed, thin wrinkles appeared in the corners, but all this made the blonde even more charming. And no, with her answer, Dolores didn't put a price on herself. She spoke from the heart. The car drove away, taking the girl farther away, and Mark stayed on the side of the road. He didn't believe in miracles, but this time the young man knew for sure that the meeting would take place again. However, he didn't guess how soon it would happen. Meanwhile, Dolores, bouncing on the back seat, looked out the window, and then the cab, not having reached its destination, stalled. "What happened? I don't understand," cried the driver. "It overheated," Dolores sighed doomedly, remembering Mark's verdict. "The coolant temperature has risen. The engine has boiled over." The cab driver looked at his companion with respect. It didn't make Dolores feel any better. Having paid for the travelled way, she flew out of the cab and ran on her own 2 feet. At some point, the girl took off her shoes and continued barefoot. And finally, she arrived running. "Oof!" exhaled Dolores, stopping in front of the entrance of an impressive multi-story building. She rested her hands on her knees, catching her breath and ignoring the surprised looks of passers-by. There was a lot to see. It's not every day you see a pretty blonde in a classic outfit, a blouse and narrow skirt tight around the hips, but barefoot. Dolores had shoes, though. The heels were sticking out of her bag. Such sights weren't uncommon in the metropolis, but typical on Friday nights near karaoke bars and clubs. Those girls were often barefoot, with smeared mascara and lipstick, clutching unfinished bottles of sparkling wine. But this was Monday morning, a time when people rushed to work or ran errands. And Dolores, panting, didn't even have water, which she desperately needed. Sweat rolled down Dolores's back, and her hair, so carefully arranged at 6 a.m, now stuck to her temples. This wasn't just due to the abnormal August heat, melting the asphalt in the urban jungle, but also because of her impromptu jog. Dolores wasn't just running to the office of the fashion magazine, she was chasing her dream. She'd spent 4 years studying journalism, fantasizing about joining this team. It was a French weekly women's magazine covering fashion, beauty, health, and everything of interest to modern women. Printed in many languages across several countries, it was one of the first glosses here. Dolores had visited this office once before, during an open class for students. It was led by the editor-in-chief, Helen Marlin, who still ran the magazine. Since then, a spark had ignited in Dolores's heart. The statuesque, self-confident woman in a business suit had left a lasting impression. Dolores wanted to become just like her. She'd even written her thesis about the magazine, which was well received, and now she was here. Her resume had passed the online selection. She was at the finish line. Dolores knew punctuality was valued in any company, yet she couldn't help but pause. She froze in front of the skyscraper, jaw slack, feeling a slight shiver. Her gaze travelled up the building, sliding over the windows that seemed to look back at her, glittering in the sunlight. How often had she passed by, dreaming of working here? How many times had she imagined walking through those doors to the elevator, greeting colleagues on the way, then pressing the button for the 20th floor as she stepped inside? That's where the magazine's office was. She took a deep breath and stepped forward. Something pricked her bare foot and Dolores gasped, snapping back to reality. She frantically began pulling shoes from her bag, putting them on as she moved. As Dolores struggled with her shoes, a flashily dressed girl jumped out of a car that had just pulled up. The scent of leather and something tobacco woody surrounded her, leaving a heavy trail. Busy arguing on her phone, the newcomer didn't look where she was going. She collided full speed with Dolores, who was balancing awkwardly on one shoe. Dolores's bag fell, spilling its contents. Resume, documents, hairbrush, and a pack of gum. The other woman, barely fazed, shrieked unhappily, "Watch where you're going!" "Oh, sorry," Dolores apologized reflexively, not fully grasping what had happened. The brunette rolled her eyes. "That's it, Mum. Stop boring me," she shouted into the receiver. "I'm already here. Bye!" With an angry snort, she hung up and looked down at Dolores, who was crouched, gathering her scattered belongings. The brunette's eyes widened in shock. "Dolly, is that you?" Dolores shuddered slightly as if a chill ran down her spine. Dolly, those were names from her distant past, from school. She'd entered that school in 6th grade and remained Dolly until graduation. The nickname was given to her by Corinne, who first recognized Dolores as being from the village, so the bully girl branded Dolores with what she considered the most rustic nickname, Dolly. Dolores had indeed lived in the village for a long time, until her father found a good job in the city and moved the family. At first, when her classmates discovered her background, they laughed at the village girl, who knew nothing about local city fashion or popular artists, but could milk cows and plant vegetables. The ingenious Dolly answered their questions about pig fodder and cow udders with a guileless smile, believing their laughter was sincere and that they genuinely enjoyed talking to her. A kind soul, she didn't yet realize that people could laugh at someone cruelly. There's little point in detailing school bullying or searching for reasons. Children often don't need reasons. Being fat, thin, smart, wearing glasses or braces, stuttering, or having freckles was enough. Dolores was a pretty, rosy-cheeked girl from the village, her flaxen hair braided tightly. She had a unique way of speaking, using words learned from her grandmother, which drove her classmates into a frenzy. Corinne disliked Dolores the most, simply because she could. She found Dolores funny, weak, and naive, worthy of crude jokes. Through Corinne and her cohorts, Dolores learned that she dressed shabbily. She also discovered that while her grandmother considered her thin, by local standards she was fat. Classmates called her a fat cow, a pig, mooing and grunting as she passed. Once they even glued a photo collage of her face on someone else's naked body to the blackboard. Physical education lessons were especially challenging. Though athletic, Dolores feared running or jumping because the girls giggled and whispered about her shaking cheeks and chest. Dolores stopped eating in the cafeteria, hiding in the restroom to eat her lunch in silence. After a year of this, she developed complexes and an eating disorder. She lost significant weight, but at what cost? These questions remained unanswered. Once, Dolores read that eating apples and drinking apple cider vinegar could help with weight loss. Her parents came home to find their daughter covered in a rash and called an ambulance. The kind doctor, after administering an injection, explained to Dolores that she looked wonderful and shouldn't harm herself with strange diets. The once sociable, inquisitive and energetic Dolores became withdrawn during her school years. She immersed herself in reading and studying. In her attempt to catch up with her classmates' more advanced school program, the stubborn girl passed them significantly. By high school, Dolores had become a beauty, an excellent student, and even an athlete. Yet she remained lonely. If any classmate tried to befriend Dolores, Corinne quickly suppressed it. Girls would pinch their noses, claiming Dolly smelled like dung, and that anyone who associated with her would smell bad too. Dolores, however, grew accustomed to this arrangement and stopped feeling inferior. She simply waited for graduation, knowing a new life would begin afterward. In last grade, the bullying ceased. Corinne realized Dolores no longer reacted to barbed comments and lost interest in tormenting her. Still, Dolores never made friends or experienced first love. Boys liked her, but Dolores never believed their confessions, suspecting another trap or form of bullying. And now she encountered Corinne again. The girl was easily recognizable, especially by her haughty look, with brown, almost black eyes. "I can't believe it. It's really you. I thought you'd gone back to the village and the cows after school," she said with a smirk. Dolores clenched her teeth momentarily. Her good mood from the chance encounter evaporated. She hurriedly stuffed her belongings into her tote and stood up. "Well, I never thought about your future at all. I decided to forget my school years like a bad dream," Dolores said, meeting her former classmate's eyes. Corinne was momentarily taken aback. She hadn't expected any pushback from the usually quiet Dolores. However, the insolent girl quickly regained her composure. "Well, I'd chat, but I'm in a hurry." She brushed her dark, sun-glistening hair off her shoulders. "I've got a meeting. Planning to, be part of the magazine. Though you've hardly heard of it. Where are you and where's fashion, right?" She gave Dolores a haughty look and started to leave. But Dolores asked involuntarily, "Are you having a job interview at that magazine? But how? Did you become a journalist?" Dolores was dumbfounded. She couldn't understand why fate was so cruel. Was she again being pushed onto the same path as the arrogant Corinne? Corinne turned, raising a perfectly painted eyebrow. "Why?" Then her face changed. "Wait, you too?" Corinne laughed loudly. Dolores wrinkled her nose, involuntarily drawing parallels between her and a fairy tale witch cackling over her poisonous brew. "Oh, come on, Dolly. Are you serious?" Corinne theatrically wiped a tear from her eye. "You're hilarious. Dolly, does someone like you stand a chance at a fashion magazine?" Dolores gripped the handle of her bag tighter, narrowing her eyes. She was in a combative mood. "I think I have a lot more to offer than you." "What are you talking about?" Corinne wrinkled her nose. "As far as I remember, you're lazy and irresponsible," said Dolores in one breath. "At school, you loved shifting your responsibilities to others and could easily misappropriate others' work, even framing friends who helped you. I don't think this magazine values that set of competencies." "You mean they want you?" Corinne snorted. "Yes," Dolores raised her chin, "because I studied journalism for a few years. I have a portfolio of recommendations and articles, and I know everything about this magazine, its history and development strategy. I'm brimming with ideas. What can you offer them?" A shadow crossed Corinne's face. She pressed her lips together, then stepped closer to her former classmate. With only centimeters between them, she hissed, "You never learned anything, Dolly. City life isn't like waking up with roosters and shoveling manure. People like me survive here, those who can snatch happiness from others' grasp. I don't need to study or know the magazine's history to get in." She smiled deceptively and whispered, "I'll give you some advice, for old time's sake. Don't embarrass yourself, Dolly. Go back to the village. You don't belong here. Don't worry about me. I've prepared myself, not by reading Wikipedia, but by sleeping with the editor-in-chief's son. I met him at a nightclub and showed him what I have to offer. The job's already mine. This interview is just a formality." She pulled away from the pale, embarrassed Dolores, who blinked, taken aback. Corinne, satisfied with the effect, grinned and winked. "Now you realize you have no chance." She adjusted her blouse, deepening her cleavage. Dolores licked her parched lips and shook her head. "All I realize is that you disgust me, even more than before. If you get the job today, it's not such a great place to work." Dolores walked past her former classmate. Corinne, angry that her words weren't getting under Dolores's skin like they used to, caught up and pushed her shoulder before walking briskly into the building's lobby. Both girls, already late, rushed to the elevator. A bucket stood in Corinne's way. A cleaning woman dipped a mop into it, methodically cleaning up spilled coffee. Corinne, wrinkling her nose in disgust, tried to go around, but almost slipped on the wet floor. Flailing, She sharply pushed an elderly man who was walking slowly towards the elevator, leaning on his cane. He lost his balance and fell, hitting the bucket of dirty water. Corinne shrieked and jumped back, but water splashed onto her light-coloured pants. Dolores, a step behind, gasped. Corinne turned back and cursed. "Why is everyone getting in my way today? Look what you've done, old man. You've ruined my pants. How am I supposed to go to a job interview now? This is a nightmare." "You should apologise," Dolores shouted, helping the elderly man up. "Do you realise what you've done? At his age, any fall could lead to a fracture." "You think I care?" Corinne snorted. "People like him belong in a nursing home or in the grave. They shouldn't even leave their house. They just get in people's way." Dolores was so stunned by the cruel words that she couldn't respond. Corinne glanced at her watch, swore under her breath, and ran to the elevator. "Enjoy your stay. I'll be the first to arrive. Take your time. My spot is secure." She waved dismissively at her rival. Dolores felt a pang in her heart, but let it go. She looked at the old man and, smiling, handed him his cane. Then she took out some tissues and helped clean his brown jacket. "Are you hurt? I'm so sorry about her," she murmured, thinking the elderly man seemed familiar. Then again, many grey-haired men looked alike. Those terrible things she said. "I'm sorry you had to hear that." The older man smiled pleasantly, his face crinkling, like more spiderweb-like wrinkles. "It's all right, sweetheart. You don't need to apologise. Were you heading to the elevator? I'll walk with you." Dolores took his arm and they walked leisurely to the elevator. After a moment of thought, he asked, "Dear, what was that girl talking about? Where were you hurrying to?" Dolores, no longer daring to check her watch, sighed. "We came for an interview at a fashion magazine, but I'm desperately late now, it seems." The man nodded, hiding a smile. They reached the elevator. "What floor?" Dolores asked. 20th, the old man smiled. Dolores nodded and pressed the button. Only when the number 20 lit up and the elevator started moving did she gasp and turn around. "Oh, I have to go there too." "I know," the man winked slyly. "And I want to tell you, my dear, that being late isn't always a defeat. Tell me, what's your name?" "Dolores," she introduced herself. "And you?" Dolores didn't have time to ask the elderly man's name or understanding the meaning behind his wise words. The elevator door opened, letting in new people, and then Dolores and the elderly man arrived at the right floor. Dolores's breath caught. The newsroom was bustling with life, people scurrying about. On the walls hung the covers of the magazine's most successful issues. Dolores, looking around, walked forward, not even noticing that the man had disappeared. Dolores involuntarily thought that, if he reminded her of someone, it was a wizard from a fairy tale, like Dumbledore, for example. Dolores found the right office and, knocking, went inside. There, in addition to her, sat several other applicants for the vacant position. In front of them was Helen Marlin, wearing leopard-rimmed glasses. She looked at the latecomer and nodded at the vacant seat. "It looks like everyone's here," she said, checking the list of candidates. No sooner had Dolores sat down than the door opened again. Dolores heard Corinne, who was sitting next to her, sigh nervously. Raising her head, she froze in surprise. "Daughter, I'll be a minute," said the same elderly man, entering the office. "Of course, Daddy," smiled Helen, in a flash turning from a stern editor into a sweet daughter. "Girls, this is my father and former editor of the magazine." That's when Dolores remembered where she knew his face from. Not from fairy tales. She had seen the man in pictures when she was studying the history of the magazine. He had aged considerably recently, making him difficult to recognize at first sight. "All I'm saying is that we value more than just usual competencies like responsibility or creativity in our magazine," the elderly man said, looking at Dolores and Corinne. "Heart, humanity and openness are what any team needs." Then he walked over to his daughter and had a quick conversation with her. Corinne sat like on pins and needles, realizing she was in trouble. After that, everything went wrong for Corinne, contrary to her plans. She didn't answer questions straightforwardly. Dolores, on the other hand, kept her cool. In the end, all the candidates were eliminated, and Helen asked Corinne to leave the office too. However, the girl jumping up from her seat caused an unexpected scene. "You can't kick me out. I have to get this job. Your son promised me," she shouted, clenching her fists. Helen's eyebrows went up. "My son?" "Yes," Corinne stomped her foot. I'll tell everyone that we slept together. If he doesn't keep his promises, I will tarnish his reputation. Okay?" Helen nodded, then picked up her phone and dialed her son's number. "Hi, are you in the office? Come up to me, please." 5 minutes later, Mark walked into the office. Dolores gasped in surprise when she saw him. He also froze, not believing his luck. A smile began to blossom on his lips. However, he wasn't allowed to be happy about the meeting. "Mark," the mother called out, folding her arms across her chest, "this lady claims you're lovers and is trying to blackmail me with it." Mark blinked, forcibly averting his admiring gaze from Dolores and turning it to the frightened Corinne. "I've never seen her before," the lawyer said honestly, "and I like blondes, not brunettes." He again slyly looked at the blonde Dolores. But it's not him! Not your son!" shouted Corinne. Helen barely restrained a chuckle. "Really? Now this smells sensational. Did you hear that, Mark? Shall we make the DNA test?" Mark hummed, and Corinne, blushing with anger, grabbed her phone and showed the picture to Helen, shoving it right in her face. "There he is! Your son!" The woman stared at the screen in surprise, then wrinkled her nose because the shameless girl had taken selfies right out of bed. "First, my advice to you, don't show shots of your intimate life to everyone you meet. Secondly, the young man in the photo is not a relative to me. I certainly didn't give birth to such a man." A thin smile appeared on the editor's lips. Mark also looked at the screen and laughed. "That's Alex. He works for us, at home. He cleans the pool. He's a nice guy," Mark said. Corinne realized that she had been tricked, used. Burning with shame, she ran out of the office. Inside remained only Dolores, who was in shock at the situation. Helen approached her and held out her hand. "I'm sorry for such a fairy tale start to a business relationship. However, I would be happy to invite you to our team. You made a good impression on my father and me as well. You'll have a trial period at first, but something tells me we'll get along." Dolores shook her hand, her cheeks flushed with joy and admiration. "I'll be very happy," she nodded. Having settled some things, Helen went out, telling Mark to see the new employee off. The guy walked beside her and, unable to resist, remarked, "Third meeting." "How third?" She was surprised. "You don't remember, but I do. Seeing you in my mother's office, I remembered. You had already come here with other students. Mother was giving you a lecture and I was watching you. You were the only one who wrote down her every word. So funny. I didn't approach you then, but I regretted it later. You ran away quickly." Dolores was amazed that Mark remembered her. The guy smiled slyly, just like a boy. "It turns out, fate?" Dolores smiled the same wide smile. "It turns out that fate." "And you already have a job. Can we have coffee now?" Mark smiled. Dolores nodded. "And why not? After all, If one of her dreams had come true, maybe everything else was real. Many years later, Dolores was still working at the magazine, but now as editor-in-chief. Her mother-in-law had given her the position with a pure heart, because her daughter-in-law was a wonderful person and a true professional. Dolores and Mark had a strong family. They raised a daughter and a son, honest and good people. As it turns out, sometimes you have to be late somewhere to make it. And if the car breaks down on the way to your dream, maybe it's not a failure, but one more step to happiness. The important thing is not to give up.